This is the account of how I came to understand that my parents never truly considered me to be their son, but rather an afterthought, a contingency plan, and someone they could take advantage of whenever it was convenient for them. My name is Jason. In what I considered to be the happiest year of my life, I was 22 years old and participating in an exchange program in Germany. It had taken years of part-time work, late-night study sessions, and scholarship hunting to get there. However, the journey itself wasn't what I was most proud of. It was my vehicle. It was more than simply an automobile. It was my vehicle. My ideal vehicle. I had saved for it for years by working extra hours, skipping out on social events, and keeping a close eye on every penny. It was an unfathomable feeling when I eventually received the keys. It had all the features I had ever desired, slim and quick. My reward for all of my hard work. I left it securely parked in my parents' driveway before I took it out for my exchange program. To prevent the battery from dying, I had even urged them to start it occasionally. "Sure," they said. "No issue. I ought to have been more aware." It all began when I received an unexpected message from Ryan, my best friend. "Ryan, did you sell your car, dude?" I scowled at the display. Me. "Not at all." "Why?" Ryan. "Well, so why is it for sale?" My stomach fell as he texted me a screenshot. My automobile, which had the same model and registration plate, was listed for sale on a local Facebook marketplace. It was far too cheap. I initially assumed it must be a scam, some lunatic exploiting my pictures to trick people. But then I saw where it was. My hometown. With my heart racing, I called my parents right away. My father answered, "Hi, Jason. How is Germany doing?" His tone was informal, as if nothing were wrong. I wasted no time. "Why is my vehicle up for sale?" Quiet. A long silence. My father then cleared his throat. "Oh, we needed to discuss that with you." I balled my hands into fists. "Speak to me? You have already listed it for sale." One more pause. Then my mother answered the phone. She had a sickly, sweet voice. "Don't overreact, honey. It's not a huge concern." "Not a huge deal?" I raised my voice. "It's my vehicle. I didn't consent to selling it. What on earth is happening?" My mother sounded as though she was describing something entirely rational when she said, "Well, Eric, your relative, experienced some financial difficulties. He needed to pay off his obligations, and you weren't really utilizing the automobile, were you?" I swear that for a moment my eyesight became crimson. "Are you serious? Are you going to sell my automobile to cover Eric's debt?" "Not selling," my father swiftly clarified. "It has already been sold." In my mind, everything became silent. As I watched things unfold, I had the impression that I was not in my own body. "You sold it already?" I hardly raised my voice above a whisper. My mother sighed as if I were exaggerating. "We didn't want to cause you any trouble. Eric truly needs assistance, and you're so far away. Family looks out for family." Family. They were discussing family. My parents, who never once provided me with assistance when I needed it. He never gave me $1 while seeing me bust my back trying to finance that car. However, what about Eric? The boy with the golden hair? The conceited relative who never worked a day in his life, but somehow ended up in trouble every time? The same Eric who, after years of saving, received a brand new automobile as a graduation present? I inhaled deeply and tightened my grip on the phone, my fingers trembling. "You sold it to whom?" "Jason, my dear." "You sold it to whom?" There was a heavy hush. "Some guy named Mark," my dad murmured. I hung up right away. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. Nothing was thrown by me. Rather, I took action. I messaged Ryan first. Me. Learn as much as you can about this Mark guy, including his identity, residence, and other details. After that, I searched my phone until I discovered what I was looking for, something I had long since stored. My parents were on the verge of regretting everything because of something: the car's title. They were unaware of the fact that the car was still legally mine. My name was on the title. This implied that they hadn't sold the vehicle, they had taken it, and I was going to hold them accountable. That night, I hardly slept at all. While lying in my German dorm room with my phone firmly grasped in my palm, my mind was racing more quickly than my car could. In my chest, the rage was like a fire that grew stronger with each breath. In my mind, I kept seeing my parents shaking hands with a stranger named Mark as they gave him the keys to the car I had purchased with my money. All for the golden kid, Eric, who somehow managed to get away with it no matter how many times he made a mistake. I wanted to yell, but I made myself think instead. I couldn't get my automobile back out of anger, but legal ownership, timing, and facts? They would. Ryan arrived sooner than I anticipated. Ryan, I located him. Mark Carter, lives 2 towns away, operates Carter's Auto Sales, a used vehicle dealership. It appears that he makes money by flipping autos. A dealer of used cars. Naturally. The situation was already clear to me. Mark intended to sell my automobile for a profit after purchasing it at a discount. I still had a chance if he hadn't sold it yet. However, my car would be gone if I waited too long. I had to do something. Quick. I skipped my classes the following morning and went directly to the consulate. I had to return home immediately. I couldn't wait for my exchange program to end. I was able to arrange an emergency return trip for that evening after outlining the circumstances. I only packed a backpack with the necessities and made my way to the airport. Anxious thoughts and restless sleep filled the ride home. I could see my parents' faces every time I closed my eyes, and I could hear their casual indifference in their voices, as though selling my automobile was no more important than borrowing a cup of sugar. My claws dug into my palms as my fists squeezed so fiercely. I was already messaging Ryan when the plane landed. Me. I've returned. Come to my parents' place and meet me. Ryan's truck arrived outside the house where I grew up, soon after midnight. When I stepped out onto the driveway where my car should have been, the neighborhood was silent, but my heart was racing in my ears. It was like being slapped across the face by the empty room. With his hands in his pockets and his eyes wide with excitement, Ryan leaped from his pickup. "You really flew back, dude? I believed you to be bluffing." I rearranged my backpack and said, "I wasn't going to sit in Germany while my car vanished forever. Have you discovered whether Mark still possesses it?" Ryan paused. "Yes, as of my last check. However, Jason, he moves automobiles quickly. We must act immediately if we are going to take any action." I fixed my jaw and nodded. "All right, let's go." The highway lights flashed by us in white and yellow streaks as we drove in nervous stillness. Getting my automobile back was the only thing on my mind. It was about 1 in the morning when we arrived at Carter's Auto Sales. The dealership was closed for the evening, and the lot was deserted and dark. The property was encircled by a chain-link fence with barbed wire on top. Behind it, rows of cars sat, shining dimly in the far-off streetlights. Ryan gestured to the far side of the parking lot. My heart jumped up and down in my throat. I recognized the streamlined form, the well-known silhouette. My vehicle. Among the other cars, still parked, still accessible. I forced myself to remain calm as I gently breathed. "All right, we must act wisely in this situation." Ryan's eyebrow went up. "Well, how smart is it?" "Because it sounds like you're going to break into a car dealership right now." I gave him a glance. I don't steal my own vehicle. Legally, I still own it. All I have to do is make sure it doesn't sell before I can demonstrate it. Ryan folded his arms. So, what is the strategy? I took out my phone and browsed through my contacts to locate the number I required. I had to try, even though it was unlikely. Me. Believe me, this will work. The ringtone echoed in my ear as I pressed the dial and waited. At last, a sleepy voice on the other end answered, "Hello? It's Jason, Uncle David. I apologize for the late call, but I need your assistance. It has to do with my car." I recounted everything to my uncle, a local police officer, including the dealership, my parents' illegal sale, and the fact that the title was still legally mine. When I was done, his voice was alert and keen. "Really? They sold it without your permission?" "Indeed. I can prove it with the title and all the documentation. However, Mark might sell it to someone else if I wait till morning." A pause followed by a sigh. "All right. Remain in place. There, I'll meet you." I shoved my phone back into my pocket and hung up. "You called a cop?" Ryan asked, staring at me. "My uncle is an investigator as well as a police officer. In this manner, I can lawfully retrieve my vehicle without providing Mark with an excuse to file a trespassing prosecution." Uncle David's unmarked vehicle arrived at the curb 30 minutes later. As he got closer to the dealership gate, he flashed his badge while wearing simple clothing. "All right," he said, "let's retrieve your vehicle." Uncle David watched the lot beyond the chain-link fence with the cool concentration of someone accustomed to dealing with chaos. The streetlights gave his badge a little glitter. "Are you certain that's your vehicle?" he inquired. With a pounding heart, I answered, 100%. "I have the receipts, the title, everything." "All right." Uncle David took out his phone and looked through his contacts, saying, "That's our leverage. Mark Carter is well known in this area." He tapped the screen and held the phone up to his ear. "Not exactly squeaky clean, but nothing we can nail him on. Yet." "This feels like a scene from a crime show," Ryan muttered as he leaned closer to me while waiting for the line to connect. "Do you believe that when Mark sees a police officer, he will go crazy?" "Hopefully," I whispered. It rang a few times before a sleepy voice answered. "Hello? Mark Carter? This is the local police department's Detective David Caldwell. I need you to come down here. I'm standing outside your dealership. Right now." A pause. Then, "What? The middle of the night is here. What on earth is happening?" "One of the cars on your lot is the subject of a property dispute. Either I start setting up a search warrant, or you come down here." The line died. Uncle David put his phone in his pocket once more. "He will appear." Ryan put his hands together in a clap. "Dude, I hope this turns out like one of those sting operations where the villain completely loses it." I didn't answer. The tiny outline of my automobile, so close but still out of reach, was the only thing I could see. About 20 minutes later, Mark Carter arrived in a beaten-up pickup truck and pulled into the lot. As he parked and got out, his headlights swept across us. In his late 40s, he was a heavy-set man with thinning hair and a perpetual frown on his face. His eyes were hazy from sleep interruption, and his shirt was only partially buttoned. He yelled, "This better be good," and slammed the truck door. "What's waking me up at? What time is it? 2:30? "Mister, we have reason to believe that one of the cars in your possession was sold without the legal owner's consent," Uncle David said calmly but firmly. "Carter, Jason Caldwell, a young man, owns the car, and he has the paperwork to prove it." Mark's frown deepened as his eyes shifted to me. "This child? What are you discussing? That automobile was a fair purchase for me." "From my parents," I interrupted abruptly. Not from me. The legal owner is me. I have the title to confirm that I paid cash for the vehicle. Across his chest, Mark folded his arms. Look, I have no idea what sort of family issue this is, but if I get a car, I can do with it whatever I want. The narrative is over. Uncle David retorted, not if the sale was illegal. The legislation is rather explicit about that. Your transaction is void if Jason is the legitimate owner of the car. Mark squinted his eyes. So what? Are you simply going to waltz in here and retract it? Not even letting me see a dime? Uncle David said calmly. That's between you and the sellers at that point. I'm here to make sure it happens legally, and Jason is here to reclaim his property. Mark's expression grew gloomy. He tightened his hands at his sides. This is bullshit. Mr. Uncle David stepped up and spoke firmly. Carter, I advise you to assist. If not, we can involve the courts and bring this down to the station. That will be far more bother than it's worth, I promise. Mark's shoulders slumped when his mouth opened as though to argue. He glanced at my automobile and calculated the loss. At last, he mumbled, All right, but until I see that title, I won't do a single thing. I took out the folder with all of my car's documents, including the title, insurance documents, and purchase receipts, after unzipping my rucksack. I gave it all to them. Mark grabbed the folder and turned through it, frowning more and more as he went. You see, I said, my voice unable to contain my rage. I own it. My parents never had it to sell. This is unbelievable, Mark said, slamming the folder shut and thrusting it back at me. Your parents informed me they were in complete control. Had I known, Uncle David interrupted, saying, Now you do. Let's conclude now. Give me the keys, and we'll head off. I was a little afraid Mark might say no. His jaw clenched and unclenched as his gaze shifted between Ryan, Uncle David, and me. At last, he growled in frustration and pulled a keychain out of his pocket, hurling it in my direction. There. Accept it. However, don't assume that your parents won't reimburse me for my money, he spat. I grabbed the keys out of the air and remarked icily, That's between you and them. I strode past him without saying another word, my heart racing as I made my way to my car. As I unlocked the door, my fingers shook a little, making the sound of the familiar click sound louder than it should have. I breathed in the subtle aroma of leather and motor oil as I slid into the driver's seat. For the first time in weeks, the tension in my chest relaxed as my fingers curled around the driving wheel. I flipped the key. The familiar purr of the engine, which I had not realized I had missed so much, roared to life beneath me. Ryan smiled as he peered through the open passenger window. You really did it, dude. You've regained it. A smile appeared on my face as I let out a trembling breath. Indeed, I did. Uncle David yelled out, All right, let's clear out. Before Mark has a change of heart. Uncle David unlatched the gate, and I shifted the car into gear and rolled toward it. I glanced at Mark as I passed him in the car. I didn't care that his look could have melted steel. No one was going to take my automobile away from me again. I floored it as soon as we got on the freeway. As I flew down the deserted road, the speedometer rose, the tires grabbed the tarmac, and the engine roared. The final traces of fury and rage were carried away by the wind that whipped through the open windows. Ryan laughed like a child on a roller coaster and whooped next to me. Yes, absolutely. Man, this is what it feels like to be free. My smile wouldn't go away. I felt alive again for the first time since that call with my folks. The car was more than simply rubber and metal. It was evidence of my hard work and independence. And I had no intention of letting anyone take that away from me. But as the adrenaline started to wear off, A fresh idea started to cross my mind. What would happen if I had to face my parents? Because there was still more to come. Just as the horizon lightened with the first signs of morning, I turned into my apartment complex's driveway. Before I turned off the ignition, the sound of the engine's rumble temporarily reverberated against the building's facade. I just sat there for a while, holding onto the wheel while I mentally relived the events of the previous evening. "Are you okay, dude?" Ryan, who was sitting in the passenger seat, asked quietly. I said, "Yeah," despite the tightness in my chest telling me differently. "My car is back, but there is still a problem with my parents." Ryan gave a nod. "Would you like to spend a few days staying at my house? Until things settle down, you know?" The fresh early morning air brushed my cheek as I opened the door and stepped outside. "Thanks, but I need to face them eventually." Ryan trailed after, and we strolled in the direction of my flat. As we arrived at the front steps, he continued, "But what you did tonight, that took guts. You defended yourself. Remember that." I forced a tiny smile. "Yes, thank you, dude. For everything." He gave me a shoulder clap. "Anytime." I stood by myself in the silent parking lot, staring at my car after Ryan had left. A mixture of pride and fear filled my emotions. Although I had won one battle, I still had to contend with my parents. There wasn't much waiting for me. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter the following afternoon. "Mom," I looked at the screen. After hesitating, I swiped to respond. "Hey, Jason!" Her voice broke with a mixture of rage and relief. "Where have you been?" "We have spent the entire morning attempting to contact you," I said calmly. "I've been busy." "I'm assuming you understand why." A pause. Then, "Last night, your uncle called us." He had, of course. "How could you have done this, Jason?" she went on, raising her voice. "Are you aware of the extent of the problem you have caused? We are facing the possibility of legal action from Mark Carter." "Is something wrong?" Anger rising to the surface, I snapped. "You didn't ask to sell my automobile, without even informing me. How did that feel, do you know? How hard did I have to work to get that car?" "We were attempting to assist your cousin," said Jason. "By taking anything from me?" My voice broke due to the intensity of my feelings. "I understand that Ethan required assistance, but why did I have to bear the cost? Why did you find it so simple to disregard my laborious efforts?" "We had no other option," she yelled, her voice a mix of guilt and annoyance. "If we hadn't intervened, Ethan would have been drowning in debt." I interrupted her. "How about me? Have you given any thought to how this might affect me? Or did you just think I'd get it? That losing what I've fought so hard for would be acceptable to me?" Over the line, there was a crackling silence. Then, more subtly, "We believed we were acting appropriately." "No, Mother. You took the action you believed to be the simplest. Furthermore, you lacked the grace to inform me until it was too late. We are still your family, even though I know you're upset." "Yes, family is meant to support one another, isn't it?" With a forceful gulp, my chest constricted. "I suppose that only holds true when it suits you." "Jason," I interrupted her one more time, saying, "I need time to determine our next course of action. Because I'm not sure if I can forgive you at this moment." I hung up and threw the phone on the counter before she could answer. I leaned on the edge of the sink, my white-knuckled hands clutching the cold metal, my pulse hammering in my ears. I disregarded my parents' constant barrage of calls and texts throughout the course of the following several days. I needed room to think, to breathe, to take it all in. But the weight of that betrayal hung over me, no matter how hard I tried to move on. Ryan called one evening as I was sitting on my balcony looking out at the city lights. "Hey, how are you doing?" "To be honest, I'm still angry, still in pain. Additionally, I'm not sure if I can make amends with my parents." "Yes, man, that's heavy. However, it might not be about making things better. Perhaps it's about determining the type of relationship you wish to have with them in the future. One in which you and your boundaries are respected." I thought about that. Yes, perhaps you're correct. And you have that car of yours if you ever need to release some pent-up energy. Get on the road and get your thoughts straight. Sometimes the best therapy is that. I laughed quietly. Indeed. Regards, Ryan. That's exactly what I did that weekend. I threw an overnight bag in the trunk and headed for the interstate, not knowing where I was going. It seemed like freedom encased in steel and chrome, the buzz of the engine below me, the infinite expanse of tarmac in front of me. The anguish and rage gradually started to fade as the kilometers passed. I came to the realization that this was more than simply the car somewhere between the city boundaries and the vast countryside. It was about defending myself, my autonomy, my decisions, and my future. I had taken a step toward becoming the person I wanted to be by fighting to reclaim something that was important to me. I had no idea how my relationship with my parents will develop in the future. Time might mend the divide, but it might not. However, I felt like I was back in control of both my life and my car for the first time in weeks. And it was sufficient. The road extended in front of them, a ribbon of asphalt slicing across the vast landscape. The engine's steady, comforting hum permeated the still air around me. I felt lighter as I drove farther, as if the burden of the previous several weeks was finally beginning to lift. I wasn't reacting for the first time in a long time. Something that had been taken from me was not what I was after. All I was doing was going forward. Late on Sunday night, I came home and parked as I normally had before my car was taken. I checked my phone while I sat in the driver's seat and let the engine run for a while. Mom missed 10 calls, 6 from Dad, 2 from Ethan. With a sigh, I combed through my hair. The pain was still there, but the rage had lessened. Even now, the treachery still stings. Nevertheless, I knew that I would eventually have to face it. I therefore made a decision. I gave my parents a call. On the first ring, Mom answered. "Jason?" She spoke with a lot of emotion. "Oh, I'm grateful. We've been somewhat anxious." "I understand," I answered calmly. "I simply needed a little time." A pause. Then, "May we speak?" "Would you please?" I paused, then let out a breath. "Indeed. Let's have a conversation." I sat across from my parents in their living room that night. It was the same location where they had casually and indifferently informed me that my automobile was missing. The energy was different this time, though. My mother murmured, "I'm sorry," in a voice that was quieter than I had ever heard. "We were mistaken. We needed to have consulted you before making that choice. Furthermore, we really shouldn't have assumed that you would simply accept it." Dad gave a nod. "We didn't stop to consider what that meant for you, even though we believed we were acting in the family's best interests." I folded my arms. "My car wasn't merely sold by you. Trust was sold by you. Do you understand?" Mom's eyes lowered to her hands. "Yes," she muttered. "We do." I looked at them for a while. I could see the genuine regret in my mom's constant wringing of her hands and in my dad's hunched shoulders. However, the harm was already done. I firmly stated, "Just because you apologized doesn't mean I'm going to forgive you. It will require time. Furthermore, nothing will return to as it was." Dad gave a slow nod. "We comprehend." The mother wiped her eyes. "Jason, I just hope we can regain your trust." I let out a sigh and clenched my fists before making myself relax. I said, "I'm not sure if you can." "But we'll see," I said. A few days later, Ethan texted me. "I just wanted to apologize, even though I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I shouldn't have profited from something that was taken from you, and what happened to me wasn't your concern. I hope we can speak sometime, but I don't expect you to pardon me." Unsure of how to react, I gazed at the message for a long time. Although he wasn't the one who sold my automobile, Ethan was the catalyst for the transaction. And without hesitation, he had taken the money? I also wasn't prepared to forgive him. I therefore didn't respond. Not quite yet. Weeks went by. Life went on. For no other reason than that I immersed myself into my career, my time with Ryan, and my car. And the rage subsided gradually. The pain subsided. There was less freshness to the betrayal. Although it was still broken, my connection with my parents may yet be repaired. We were gradually renovating according to my wishes. Ethan kept his distance, allowing me room. Thank you for that. I eventually pulled up his message once more one evening while I was driving and parked on a peaceful overlook outside of town. I read it twice. After a long time, I finally typed a response. "I'm not sure whether I can forgive you. However, I'm open to speaking." After pressing send, I put my phone down and turned on the engine. The road was open and waiting in the distance, and I felt free for the first time in a long time.